It's time. It's time. Oh, yes, it's time once more. Yes, indeedy, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, step right up, step right up. It's time to spin the wheel of irrelevant tabletop role-playing game controversy arguments. And today's topic is OSR bad. And why are we bad? Because of backstories. The OSR doesn't get backstories. So apparently our friends over at Black Lodge Game decided to do some bear baiting by going on Twitter today and posting a series of tweets about how one group of players does backstory better than another group of players, and the OSR doesn't understand backstory, and the whole argument about backstory and player agency. And, this is all over the whole Sparkle trolls need their characters to have 50-page backstory. And most of us say, no, really, elevator pitch. Everything I need to know about your character, you can tell me in 2 minutes, or I've lost interest, right? So I guess they've been baiting people, and my buddy Aaron made a video about it, and I've decided that I should not be left out of clout chasing, and I will make a video about the wheel of irrelevant topics that is backstory, because we need to argue about backstories, because your way is better than my way, or my way is better than your way, and at the end of the day, no one cares. Okay, so this is all comes from the whole 2-minute backstory versus 50-page backstory. And the problem is not that your character has a 2-line backstory or a 50-page backstory. You want to write a 30-page backstory for your character? Great, fine. I encourage the creativity. Please do. And if you want to share that with me, great, fine. I would love to read your creative content. Send it to me as an email before the game. Now, during the game, I don't want to spend an hour of my limited 3-hour time block as you go through your 50-page backstory, especially if that 50-page backstory is not really in any way, shape, or form going to affect the game. Okay, in your mind, you have this backstory. Great. Now, Gygax himself said it's not about the backstory. It's about the going forward story. Okay, all these things happen to get your character to this point. And now we're going forward. How those events affected you, great. But what if you put things in your backstory that don't exist in my game? I am the last son of the king. What king? There's no kings in my world. Maybe you should have okayed this with me. That's the other problem, is that the backstory is player agency. We expect that if I write this 50-page backstory, everything in my 50-page backstory needs to be true. And you need to role play it with me. And if you don't, you're taking away my player agency, and therefore you're racist. You're a bad person. When really, session 0 resolves the whole problem, you goddamn fucking marks. Dear God, why do we have to keep going over this? Okay, this is why we have session 0. This is why we are gifted with this amazing ability to communicate with each other in between games that for some reason people aren't using. Great, you have written this backstory for your character in your brain, and it's 30 pages long. Great, go with it, publish it. Maybe you'll be the next Glenn Cook or Tolkien. I don't know. Run with it. Who knows? You might be a Times bestseller. Maybe you don't do anything with it. Great. But if you're going to include things in your 50-page backstory, you need to clear it with me so I can tell you, yes, that's okay because that does exist in the game, or, well, no, that doesn't exist in my world, which is why we had session 0, so we could all discuss what was and wasn't in the world. But maybe we could work on a compromise, maybe you're not the daughter of the king because there's no established monarchy in my world. I've decided to use a different form of governor, but that doesn't mean you can't be the daughter of somebody important. Let's work on it. Now, if you, the player, aren't willing to compromise, then that's not the DM's fault. Now, if the DM just says, no, screw you, well, then, yeah, the DM's being a jerk, and then probably you could have compromised. Really, at the end of the day, does it take that much effort to go, fine, you are the last daughter of the king of this little teeny island, apparently, that exists in my world now, but the events don't really affect my world, but fine, you can run with that, and that helps shape your backstory. We can go forward with the game, and now that I know these things are there, maybe I'll add some of them in your story. Who killed your dad? Maybe they'll show up in my game. I don't know. But if you expect me to spend 1 hour of every one of my 3-hour game sessions listening to you talk about this backstory? No, that's unfair to me, and that's unfair to everybody else at the table. So the accusation is the OSR doesn't know how to backstory. Well, Black Law Games, that's a pretty vague accusation, and sort of just feels like you're sort of bear baiting to start fights. I mean, you do realize the OSR is not one person, right? It's not like Dungeons and Dragons 5e players. Okay, Dungeons and Dragons 5e players and Dungeons and Dragons 5e and the people who make Dungeons and Dragons 5e are a very defined group. Okay, we know who made Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. We know who plays and runs Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. We know who writes and creates stuff for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. That is a very defined, limited term. There's only, a couple million, apparently, 15 million, if you believe Wizards of the Coast Steiner math, anywhere between 5 and 32 million people on the earth at any given point in time are playing 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, so that's a very defined term. The OSR doesn't know backstories, doesn't get backstories. Who in the OSR? Is there one particular person? You do realize that the OSR encompasses a very large group that don't just play fantasy games. In fact, if you look at the list of OSR games under the Wikipedia, there's like 3,000 and counting. So basically you're saying everybody who doesn't play your way is getting backstories wrong. So 5e players are getting backstories right, because I've played in a 15-year-long AD&D campaign where I role-played the heck out of my OGL OSR character for 15 years, including fighting with the DM for like 3 years straight to bring the character back to life after he was killed off. You know what that character's backstory was? We met him in a cave. Now, you don't believe me that it's not about backstory, it's about forward story? You don't believe me about, great, these things happened in your character's past, run with them, develop that as we play, but really it's your character now and your character going forward that's important to my story, not your character going behind. Don't believe me? Oh, Wikipedia, endless font of information. Can you please tell me who is the single most popular character in fiction today? I'll give you a hint. He was that guy. Yep. Batman. Batman is the #1 most popular fictional character pretty much in the world. You know what Batman's 30-page backstory is? I saw my parents killed in an alley. That's his backstory. All right, let's move on. If you don't believe, continue on. Oh, Wikipedia, can you please give me the list of the top 100 characters in fiction by popularity? Oh, #1, Superman. There we go. What's his backstory? Strange visitor with powers from another planet. That's his backstory. That is literally Superman's backstory. He is a strange visitor from another planet with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Who's #2? Mickey Mouse. Doesn't have a backstory. No backstory. What is Mickey Mouse's backstory? None. Day 1, he's driving a boat. Steamboat Willie, the very first appearance of Mickey Mouse. What's his backstory? We don't know. He's on this boat. He's driving a boat. He's whistling. He's the most iconic character in the world. #3, Santa Claus. He shows up every Christmas and brings you presents. Okay, but Santa Claus has a very well-established backstory. #4, James Bond. We still don't fucking know his backstory. Is it his name? Is it a title? Bugs Bunny. No backstory. Just showed up. Dracula. Okay, he has a backstory. Batman. Backstory. I saw my parents killed in an alley. Dorothy Gale. I hated where I lived. Darth Vader. You do not know the power of the dark side. What's his backstory when we first meet him? Okay. How about, I don't know, who's some other ones? Anyone. Your backstory can be 30 pages. Your backstory can be 5 pages. Your backstory can be 2 lines. It's important to you. Run with it. If you feel I need to know it. Great. Share it with me through this so it doesn't interrupt the game. This is why we have session 0. Literally, session 0 is the response. Now, to Black Lodge Games and their desire to cause more controversy by claiming that the OSR doesn't get backstory. I don't even know what that fucking means. Okay, guys, we don't get backstory. Well, then who does? Because for every 5e player that does get backstory, there's others that don't. For every 5e player who's like, my backstory is I'm a fighter. The last 5e game I played, which lasted like a year, and the 5e game I played before that, which lasted like 8 years or 4 years, or like, our backstories were like, one line. My backstory was the party needed a healer. And then I rolled a background and I was like, oh, outsider. Okay, I'll be a barbarian healer. I'm a shaman from the wildlands. That's literally my character's backstory. That's all we knew. And then we built the story as we played. I would say things like, hey, since we're in the neighborhood, can I find some people for my family? And the DM would either say, yeah, sure. Or no, they're not around right now. That was it. It was my backstory was I had a family. And then as we played longer, I was like, oh yeah, I've got 3 wives. And the DM was like, great, fine. Okay. But I'm looking to marry off my sister because, I've got sisters, and as the head of my tribe, it's important for me. And then we just ran with it. And I kept trying to fix up NPCs with my NPC sister. My backstory was literally, we needed a healer, The other guy, when the game's backstory was, he was a guy with a sword who needed a job. That was his backstory. We developed the stories as we played, as it's supposed to. So again, what do you mean we don't get backstory? We don't understand backstory. Did you just go online and toss that out there to start fights? Because I kind of think you did. I kind of think you were just clout chasing to get attention. To go, oh, you OSR, OGL, you don't get backstory. OGL, OSR, bad. A lot of people get off on the whole OSR bad. Every single solitary person in the OSR is a horrible human being. Literally, that's everybody who doesn't play a game who plays a game other than 5e, okay? Do indie games fall into the OSR, the OGL? No, they don't. But sure, basically they do. Okay, there's D&D, everybody else. And what the OSR is, I don't even know, because there's like 6,000 games that could be counted as OSR. And sure, a huge portion of those OSR games are OGL D20 fantasy clones. But for every OGL D20 fantasy clone, there's 5 games that aren't. And they're still OSR, the old school, trying to recreate games we played in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that we can't find anymore. You role-playing wrong. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. We don't get it. I think you're just clout chasing. I think you're just trying to start a fight. But as I am a outspoken member of the OSR OGL and have been called various horrible names, I'm a horrible human being, I'm an idiot, I'm a racist, I'm a sexist, I'm a homophobe, all these horrible things, I might as well embrace it. So yes, I guess everything I get about backstory is wrong. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me the right way because, as a published screenwriter, I follow the elevator pitch. Everything I need to know about your story is in the first, 10 pages of the script. If I'm not hooked by the first 10 pages of the script, I'm not into your movie. You know how much the first 10 pages of the script are? About 2 minutes. 2 minutes. The first 2 minutes to 2 minutes of a movie is the first 10 pages of the script. If you're not hooked in the first 2 minutes of the movie, you're probably not going to be hooked in the movie. So that's what the elevator pitch means, which means if I'm not hooked into your character by the first 2 minutes of your backstory, I'm probably not going to care about your backstory. So it's great that you wrote 30 pages. Please write 30 pages, write 100 pages, publish it, become a New York Times bestseller with the backstory for your character. Share your backstory with me if I'm running a game. Great, I want to see it. Share it with me during session 0, during this. And if you have to have your character be the last surviving child of the king in this 50-page backstory, great. We can come up with some compromise to work in with it. And if you're willing to compromise with me, great. If you're not willing to compromise with me, sure, go online and tell people horrible things about me because it's free press and they'll still come to my channel. So feel free to talk crap about me. I will just thank you for the free press. I'm sure Black Lodge Games is right now thanking me for the free press. So if you want to hear me continue to talk about this wrong, subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed yet. Help the OGGM reach 2,000 subs by being wrong about backstories. And I will continue to sarcastically make fun of this because I am your grumpy guide to all the tabletop role-playing game news, weather, and general internet nonsense. It's Friday, it's 4 o'clock, and we have once again spun the wheel of irrelevant tabletop role-playing game controversies. Thank you, Aaron the Pendantic, for making a video about this. Thank you, Black Lodge Games, for making a video about this. Thank you, Mom, Dad, and everybody I've ever met. I'm out of here. It's Friday. I'm going to go watch Netflix. See ya. Go, go, Power Rangers.